knows. Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's a Friday afternoon, and I'm joined today by Jim Orr. We are here, of course, for the next hour to talk about Celtic and all things Celtic. We're going to start off looking at last night's result. Jim, you were at the game. I'm asking the question, how do you go from Bayern to 8 months later in Braga? We have fallen from a place where we thought we were a Champions League side where we could compete and require some tweaks in the summer to a side that seems hapless, devoid of ideas and energy. It's all a bit dysfunctional at the moment, Jim.
Yeah, I think we saw that coming last night. We've not been too good start of the season. We're just going over old ground, aren't we, in terms of not bringing in players. Thought we played well on Saturday against Hibs. Another day we won that game quite convincingly. I thought last night there was nothing in it. I think I texted that to the group chat at half-time, nothing in it. Schmeichel's the difference between the two teams. And then we get a goal chalked off, which was, I saw it later on on TV. You think, what's a goal? So if that goes in, I think we're going to win the game. So not that that's anything to do with the drop in quality that we've had for the past, however many months that is, 8 months or so. But we are who we are. I think we just have to get on with it. We can move on. That's us to January. So I think the manager has to step up and the players have to step up. And last night wasn't great. I just thought two pretty average teams. I don't think we deserve to lose the game. But yeah, we are where we are this season. Obviously, there's all the turbulence behind it with fans unrest and it's been quite a long season, I think. And I think having lost the game last night, I think the next European game becomes quite a big game in that if we lose that, then we can forget about the Europa. Maybe we use that to bring in fringe players or academy players or change systems, or maybe just use that to experiment with. Because I think I've said before that a team of our size should be competing in that Europa League. We should be going pretty far into that Europa League. Maybe last year's team would have went quite far into the Europa League. Certainly this team is, as you said, it's quite a bit down than what we had last time. And the thing is, I've said before that what we should be looking to do every transfer window is have 2 new first-team players net. Mm-hmm. And I think we've actually done that net-wise. When you think about, I'm just trying to remember now, Kieran Tierney comes in for Taylor, say, Tanecki comes in for Kuhn, say, Ian Atcho comes in for Ida, say, Nigzin's a new guy in the team, and Balakwisha, if that's how you say that, he's a new guy in the team. So these are 2 net new guys. But the fact Balakwisha wasn't playing last night, I think, tells its own story. And even though we are, I think, 2 first-team players up net on last time, the timing of when we signed them was unacceptable. If we'd have got all these guys in at the start of August and they bedded in, then that'd have been different. So I think if I'm playing devil's advocate here, if I wanted 2 new first-team players net in that transfer window, I think we got that. I just think the timing is what let us down, let everyone down. And obviously, even over this ad nauseum, I think we're just going over the same stuff again. And I think also the fact that while I thought we played well on Saturday and should have won the game, if it was played this time last season, then Kuhn or Kyogo or either somebody would have popped up and scored a goal or 2 and would have won the game. So we are where we are.
That lack of killer instinct, cutting edge quality. Jim, I'm at the stage now where I've followed Celtic across 5 different decades. How scary is that? From the 1980s right up until the present day. And there are some seasons you look back on, Jim, and you think there are moments within the season like that could have fallen in our favour, and it could have, should have, would have. And then sometimes when you're in the belly of the beast, you get a sense that it could be a season like that. And just last night after the game, I was talking about Brendan's first season back, where there was a really poor performance against Hearts, where they beat us 2-0, and I could not see a way out. I looked at that performance against Hearts and I thought to myself, we're not winning the league this season. We just didn't have the fluidity, the rhythm of a side. The quality had not been brought in in the pre-season transfer window. And I'm not quite there yet, but sometimes it's a lot of things. It's like a perfect storm where a lot of things happen all at the same time, and the result is that you don't win enough football games. So when I was watching last night, I'm looking at the energy of the team. I believe in energy in all walks of life, and it was flat. It was really flat. And I think to myself, look, I'm not trying to be a body language expert. Let's just look at the facts here. So we know that Yang and Maeda were in the process, Jim, of leaving the football club. Yang was going to Birmingham. There was interest in Maeda from either Brentford or a German side. He had emptied his locker. We know the story. And I think you can maybe throw one or two others that haven't been confirmed into that mix of players who perhaps were coming to the end of their cycle, who had perhaps been promised a move and the move didn't materialise. Therefore, I think it's okay to suggest that they guys aren't 100% in the room. Now, Brendan Rodgers has already spoken about this with Diaz and Maeda. It might be the same with Rio Hatate. It may be the same with Yang. There's 3 guys. There's 4 people missing from this Europa League squad who were brought in the summer, albeit one of them's Osmond, who was a young kind of project player for the future. Shin Yamada and Inamura have travelled from the other side of the world to be Celtic players, and they're not in the squad. Jimai Simpson-Pusey has come up from Man City, very highly rated young defender, not in the squad. There's another 4 guys who may be unhappy. So before you know it, Jim, you've got a collection of players in the squad who might not be very happy at the moment. And that's all about energy. It's about being able to go into a game and fire on all cylinders. I don't think you can when you've got a quarter of the squad that may not be 100% happy at the football club. That's not good enough. The point you made about bringing players in who might actually be good enough by the end of the season, but not bringing them in soon enough. Therefore, they're not 100% fit. They're not 100% sharp. They don't have that fluidity and the rhythm that we're talking about where they've got the relationships. So you put all this together and what you find is a very fragmented performance. I agree with you on the weekend. I thought we created loads of chances. It was a matter of time before we scored a goal. If Iheanacho's 6 weeks in the door 6 weeks earlier and he's fit and he's got these relationships and the connections around the park, he scores a goal. And we'll talk about the goal that he did score last night. So I think it's this word I keep going back to, dysfunction, Jim. And as well as yourself going on and on and on about this, what I would like to talk about is how do you sort it? And I think that's where you strip back a few layers and you say, well, is it a Brendan issue? Some of it is. Some of it is. The refusal to play certain players. Would Simpson-Pusey, if he had been fit, done a better job than Dane Murray last night, who looked absolutely off the pace, like he did when he was introduced against Aston Villa last season? I sometimes feel it's unfair to throw a player in when they've not been playing. Some of the blame has to be the manager. Some of the blame has to go on the players. Of course it does. But a big part of that blame goes, the very root of the issue is the bad recruitment, the bad timing of the recruitment. We chased Balaquisha for a whole year. He's the type of guy you want to see in a European game, Jim. And we can't shoehorn him into the team. So there's issues all over the place at the moment. But what I would like to do is talk about resolving them. How do you resolve these issues, Jim?
I was just thinking there's a great Jock Stein quote, which I'm trying to remember, about how to be a good manager. It's about keeping the 6 players that hate you away from the 5 who are undecided. So, that's the job of a manager. That's why he's getting paid the guts of £3 million a year. So he has to play the cards he's been dealt with. Maybe not the cards he would like to have had, but them's are the cards. And Inamura looked quite a tight player. Shin Yamada looked no bad. So there's players there. I think the system isn't working. When I got home last night, I watched the Rangers game for my sins. And I quite like the system they have. I know they've been underperforming. And I said, certainly on the Acsom chat groups, I don't think there's much between these 2 squads. I know it's great to laugh at what's happened north side of the city, but the difference this season is the fact that they've been dropping silly points and we've been grinding out results. And I said that after the Hearts had beaten them Ibrox, and on the group chat everyone's up, and I'm saying, well, we can't be complacent because, as I said, we're grinding out results in the following day, we go to Kilmarnock, and we're very lucky to score a last-minute penalty. So I don't see much between those teams, and that's just dropped a couple of points. And at some point they will come good. So I don't think this league is over by any means at all when we've got Hearts in the background. But what I like about them, I watched in particularly the second half last night, I like that attacking system they've got. They've got 3 skillful, attack-minded players playing behind the centre forward. And I think if we'd had those 4 players, I'm trying to remember them now, Asgard and Antman and Gassama and Miovski, if we had those 4 players at the start of the window, we would have hammered Kairat, absolutely slaughtered them. And it's quite a good way of playing football. It's quite an offensive way of playing football, and it's quite good to watch. And I know that they're not winning many games doing that, but I think if those 4 guys were at Celtic Park, I think we would be storming that. So I think there's an issue with the system there. We've got a whole lot of players. We've got a big squad there. And that's the job of the manager. At the end of the day, it's down to him to play. I mean, he has all the cards there. It's up to him to play the right cards. What's your strongest team? Don't know. What's the strongest system? Don't know. Which are the players' best positions? Don't know. But there's some people who've been successes. Tenetsky's been good. Ian Acho has looked as if he could be quite good. The fullback Sarachi looks to be quite good. Others haven't stepped up to the plate. Kieran Tierney looks like a shadow of his former self. Alistair Johnson's not playing. He makes a big difference when he comes back. Hopefully, pretty soon, he'll make a big difference, I think. So the manager has all the cards. It's up to him to play the cards. And I think we're all getting a bit deja vu when we look at the manager's last time at the club, that astonishing first season and then gradually worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, whereby in his time coming back, the first season, the first, if it was 8 months, were pretty turgid. In the last 2 months, we go over the line. This time last season, we're scoring goals for fun. And it all tailed off, as you said, after the Munich game, everything tailed off. And I saw a stat, which I can't remember what it was, how many games we've won since the Munich game, and it's not very many in terms of if you're a Celtic supporter and been used to winning 80% of your games, whatever. So there's always something there, but the manager has to sort that out, and that's what he's getting paid all that money for. And he's got loads of players there who hasn't tried, and obviously there's unlimited systems that he could try, but it seems very, very rigid on that 4-3-3. And as I said, I liked that 3 attacking players behind the centre forward. And we play games at Celtic Park with the greatest respect to every other team in Scotland, maybe apart from one. We should be attack. We don't need 4 defenders. I know you can say, well, they're not really 4 defenders, but so you can play tunes on that all day long. Just get more forwards on the park, get more strikers on the park, because we have lost a lot of goals with the players that who have left.
Just looking
so
at that.
How are you going to substitute that? Well, maybe if you played maybe play 2 strikers, maybe you just change things. I think that's all we're looking for. And the game on Sunday, I think Motherwell have been, along with Hearts, been the surprise package this season, haven't it? So apart from when they played Rangers in the first game, I haven't seen them, and they were dead impressive that day. And apparently they've been dead impressive since. So that'll be a hard game as well. But as Celtic playing at home with their resources, we should be doing just attack. And this, what I noticed last night was, I'm in the Jock Stein stand, the Celtic end. So obviously they were shooting towards us that first half. And at various points they had 4 or 5 forwards pushing right up on our defence, and we had no idea what to do. And it was really, really effective like that. And then watching the game, I think the number of times we had to pass the ball back to Kasper Schmeichel compared to the number of times they passed the ball back to their keeper, it must have been a ridiculous amount back to Schmeichel compared to their goalkeeper, because they seem to be a bit smarter, they seem to be a bit more tactically astute. And even big Laga Bielka strove through the game. He was playing good passes. Our guys at the back can't play passes more than 20 yards. They don't risk it. You'll see one of the forwards making a move and Skills get the ball and they'll just think, nah, I can't pass it to him. I'll pass it 20 yards to the side and I'll get it back. And then we go back to Kasper. And he was just a complete bag of nerves last night, Schmeichel. Gave away 3 passes when he's trying to be clever, and then obviously it was ridiculous for the goal. So maybe it's time for him to have a wee rest. But how do you change it? That's entirely down to the manager. You can change 1 to 11 if he wanted. He can change the system. He can be better tactically. He can be better use of the substitution. He can put 5 subs. You can change a whole attack. It's just limitless possibilities. There is no excuse. And you can talk about the board, which we no doubt we will, and we can talk about recruitment, which we no doubt will. The players we have should be good enough to win this league, not by a canter. Because I think, as I said, I think Rangers will come good. And hopefully for the good of Scottish football, Hearts keep going. Hearts make it a challenge and maybe just lose on the last day again. And that makes it exciting. And I think the phrase the manager used a few weeks ago was about manufacturing your own stress. And I think that's exactly what we're doing. We're just manufacturing our own stress by the players that we're playing, the formations that we're playing, the tactics that we're employing, the subs that we're making. Apart from that's perfect.
Well, the manufacturing rather of your own downfall is something that I think about quite a lot, Jim, because we had a good discussion with David Lowe a few weeks back on This Is Acsom, and he was talking about the grand old Duke of Cork. He takes you up to the top of the hill and he takes you back down again. And I think that the last hill we went up was Bayern Munich in February, and I brought the team flashed up there. I'm going to keep flashing it up because there's just, even if that's your starting point, you think, right, tweak it. It doesn't need wholesale changes. Just tweak that team and go again this year. The players that I would mention in terms of goals that we have lost from last season, albeit two of these guys only played half a season in Kyogo and Jota. Jota didn't play a great deal. 80 goals and assists between Kyogo, Jota, Ida and Kuhn. All four players have either left the building or are on the treatment table, and they've not been replaced. And the one guy who was scoring goals for fun last season, for the reasons already explained, isn't playing to his best this season, and that's Dyson Maeda. You mentioned Kasper Schmeichel, Jim. 3 times in 15 minutes, he played a ball straight to the opposition, and then he concedes that goal. And I'm listening to Joe Hart, and as much as I love him and he's a legend and all the rest of it, and I hope he joins us because he's been asked for a live event next year at some point. He was sticking up for Kasper and going on about how it was dipping and spinning and swerving and all this kind of thing. Well, there's 2 things I would take from it. Kasper Schmeichel should save that. The second thing is, online people are saying, oh, it was a speculative effort. It was a hit and a hope, Jim. No. That's what I do when I'm playing football. I wish our players would strike from distance far more often. I mean, the guy thought, I'm going to chance my mitt here, and he scores the goal, and everything changes at that moment. But I think the big question, and we're going to start focusing on certain aspects of last night before we look at the wider issues that obviously are perhaps coming to a head on Monday at this meeting. Nice product placement there, Jim. Let's start off with Kasper, the number one. People have been talking about him since the injury, which you'll remember thinking back to last season. He got injured playing for Denmark. He's got over 100 caps playing for Denmark. He goes down and gets injured. And because the international the manager had already used all the subs, he has to finish the game. So he plays on with an injury, you'll remember, Jim. And who suffers from that? Well, Celtic do. So I think Sinisalo has shown himself to be a very capable deputy. Is it time, do you think, talking about the manager with all these options available, is it time to change the keeper?
100%. Yeah, 100%. I think managers live and die by their decisions. That's why they're paid ridiculous amounts of money. And I think, and it's not a defence of Kasper last night. The point I made about every time we had the ball, they had 4 or 5 guys pushed right up, and we didn't know what to do. So when Kasper had the ball, there wasn't many options, and eventually he clicked, I need to play this long, and we don't have a big centre forward, so he just came straight back. And that's about having, different horses for courses. We don't have a big physical striker. Johnny Kenny possibly is that big physical striker, although albeit we wouldn't think he's going to score 20 goals a season. So you have to mix and match your squad, and you have to kind of be flexible in terms of what you do. But in terms of the Kasper Schmeichel thing, I think, again, what do I know about football? But basically, if your keeper makes those mistakes, again, you put him back in, and I'm Sinisalo, I'm thinking, well, what is this guy got to do for me to get a chance in the team? Score 5-1 goals. The cup final we should have won well before Kasper Schmeichel's mistake. That's all part of a different thing as well, I think. But yeah, I think if you've got a big squad and somebody is below par on the pitch, you have to take them out and bring someone else in. Otherwise, the bit about trying to manage. I mean, being a football manager must be a really difficult job. You've got 25 to 30 young guys who have all got egos, who all want to play, who will all be really hacked off. And as fans, we don't really think about that. If you're a player and you get brought on the 91st minute and you get 2 minutes of a game and you've been training all week, you're not happy at that. Of course you're not happy at that. But I think maybe you're talking about stripping the layers away of things. I think, and you use this word dysfunctional, so I'll kind of piggyback on that. But there's a lack of strategy for me all over the club, be it on the field or off the field. I look at our corners and our free kicks and our throw-ins, and you're thinking, does anyone coach them to do these things? It just seems like made up on the day. And I know down in England they've more money, but they're bringing in specialists, throwing coaches, and all these things are fine margins, So I look at that and I think, what are we doing here? How often do we score for corners and free kicks or quick throw-ins, whatever? Not a lot. So that's what's happening on the park. So you think, so I would ask a dead simple question. What do we do? Do we actually coach that, or do we just leave it and see what happens? If we do, I think that's not something we should be doing. You go off the park thing. And I talked about, here's a dead simple idea. Every transfer window have a net 2 new first team players. That's an objective. Do that. But then how do you manage the squad? How do you avoid what we've just got into with the Yangs and Maeda and whatever? And to me, again, what do I know again at football, is to say that if you sign somebody, and we've just signed the lad Tonetsky, right? Is it a 4-year deal, 5-year deal? Don't know. But anyway, say it's a 4-year deal, right? That should be the policy, I think. We sign you on a 4-year deal, and after 2 years, we review that. And if you've been a kind of top guy in the team, you're offered a new contract with more money. If you knock it back, you sell them, because that's the peak of their powers, and that's the peak money you get. And you've got somebody lined up to come and take their place. You don't let the contract run down. You don't let the person think, I could move, I could come back. And that's exactly what we've done with Maeda. Because the optimum time to have sold Maeda was after last season. He's won all the awards that are going. He's really, really hot. And if and I said this about Abada at the time, there's a point whereby if you sell him, the fans won't be happy because they'll think, why are you selling this guy? But you're thinking, he can't be that good again. He really can't be that good again. And that's when you're looking for a bit of football intelligence and people to make those kind of decisions. Think, Maeda will never do that again. And we as fans were all stunned by last year. It wasn't as if we expected that to happen. We were all stunned by it. So and I think most fans would have said, chances of him doing that again are not going to be happening. Therefore, sell him. We'll get top dollar for him because of the season he's just had, and we'll get Seb Tonetsky coming in, and he hits the ground running. And we think, Maeda, who is he? And we've banked 25 million and got somebody who's just as good. That's a strategy. The 4-year thing. Do we do that? I don't think we do anything like that at all. I think we just make up as we go along. And that's the thing that annoys me. And maybe, you refer to this meeting on Monday night. What is it? These are all the kind of questions. What is your strategy for doing that? You're not divulging any secrets. Right? And I would have thought that a normal functioning football club, as opposed to a dysfunctional football club, would have had that kind of overall. Obviously, you couldn't maybe stick rigidly to that, but maybe that's the principle. We try and do this, and you maybe deviate it now and again, and you sign certain players maybe for longer term or whatever. But what is the strategy? Why don't you share it with us so that we can say, well, you know what? That's pretty clever. Whereas what we've had now, as you said, we've got players who are kind of at the end of their cycle, we've really missed out on top dollar or getting top dollar for these guys. And if our board are the kind of smart individual they think they are and making all these monies from selling Jota and Kieran Tierney, well, you missed the boat with Maeda. Why? Because I don't think you've got a strategy. I think it's all off the cuff. Somebody offers you 25 million for Jota. Brilliant. Look how clever we are. We get 25 million. No, you weren't clever. It's opportunistic. Matt O'Reilly, opportunistic. The Matt O'Reilly one, I'd have said, once he's done his 2 years, you offer him a bumper deal, he doesn't take it, then you sell him anyway. And that's the thing. And Ange said that as well. Don't get too close to these people, because they'll be, the fans are the one constant. These are guys that are just passing through. And I think, and I'm of a generation where you had Murdo and Tommy Burns and Big Roy and Peter Grant and all these guys who were there for a long time. And slowly, even an old guy like me is coming to the point that don't get too attached. They will go, and they will go quite soon. And even a kind of Seb Tonetsky, who looks really good, if he keeps that up, then end of next season, the chance that we could sell him for a lot of money. And that's what will happen. So don't get too worked out about it. But as long as we've got the next Seb Tonetsky coming in, that's fine. And as long as we're successful, and if we're playing good football as well, that would be good. But everything needs some sort of strategy, some sort of plan. I don't know what it is.
I think where it breaks down, Jim, like yourself, the normalisation of a player coming in and then being sold off is something that's happened over the last couple of decades. I mean, it didn't really happen in the Martin O'Neill era, where the signings that Martin O'Neill made were not sold for profit, but it's something that we now do, and Celtic fans are used to it. Where it breaks down for me is I don't think, it'd be great for them to share the strategy with us as football fans, Jim. I don't even think certain departments share that strategy internally. And that's where the issue is. Because if you have some guys who are like constants in the team, and I'm talking about people like Callum McGregor, for example, where there's no sign that Callum McGregor is going to leave the football club, and James Forrest and Tony Ralston, you might have a handful of these guys who are always there. And that's great. And I think that's important. Actually, many of those types of players come through from the academy. I actually thought Greg Taylor could have been one of those guys, but for whatever reason, we didn't give him his contract. So you've got your constants. You've then got the guys like, let's say, Nicholas Kuhn, for an example, Jim, where you give him a 5-year deal, but 18 months down the line, right, he's got to the point where anything above £15 million Celtic are going to consider it, right, for any player. And so, yeah, absolutely. But the recruitment team have to have communication with the scouting team.
Yeah.
Aye, 2.0. So they need to have communication with the scouting team to say, right, okay, Como have come in. It's a wee bit earlier than we would have envisaged. We would have planned to maybe sell him after 2 or 3 seasons. However, who's the next guy on the list? Well, here's our top target. And you bring him in, and there's no panic. There's an issue there because that's dysfunctional. We don't have it. We end up panicking, and we end up buying 2 left wingers instead of replacing Kuhn. So it's not working.
Yeah, so I don't want button there. But basically, you actually have Kuhn 2.0 in the building before Kuhn 1.0 leaves.
Yeah,
that's the
like
issue.
Edward coming in when Dembele's in there.
Ideal. That was ideal. Brilliant plan. Loved it. But it's also the fact that I think as fans also we think just go out and sign people and whatever. And I've said in the past, and not a lot of people agree with me that being a kind of accountant guy, I don't want to sign. I don't want to spend a lot of money if you can avoid it. Benjamin Negrin for a couple of million, that's my kind of signing, because we've signed this guy Balikwisha, and without his case too much. What's his contract? 4 years, 5 years, something like that. Was he on 20 grand a week or something like that? 5 million. We've invested £10 million in Balikwisha. And I watched the game last night, and he was warming up at the side, and a couple of times he pointed to himself when the manager was going to make subs. He was going, he's not getting on here. He's one of the big summer signings, £5 million, good money. Me? Nah, you're all right, you're not getting on, pal. You're thinking, how dysfunctional is that? Now,
I know.
Maybe he might come good, and I don't want to come down really heavy on the lad, but I've seen 0 from him, and it's exaggerated by Tenetsky and how good he's been.
Yes.
And, I don't want to go on too much, but we've invested the guts of £10 million in this guy, in the hope, I'm assuming, that we'll get a transfer fee of upwards of 10, 12 million pounds because it's an investment. And I thought what we were lacking last night, and I've said this before a number of times, is experience on the park. You're out signing 30-year-old guys who have had 10 seasons in the Norwegian league or the Swedish league, who's got some Champions League experience, who's, past their peak, maybe, but can add that experience to the team. Somebody at the back, somebody in the middle of the park, just taking a camp. Aaron Moy was the perfect example of that. When Ange brought him in, you think, this guy for... But he was really understated. He kind of kept things going. And when he left, you can see the difference because we didn't have that pace. To help Callum McGregor, I think Callum McGregor is carrying a huge load in that team. I don't think we have many leaders in that team who can take the game by the scruff of the neck. I don't think they're there. And I think last night was a perfect example of that again. And I think most of the games this season, we've kind of waited for somebody to step up and do something. Go on, do something. Somebody do something. And they've not been able to do it. And that's, we haven't been scoring goals and we're dropping points. And it's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. I think all this, and that's why, just to get back to one of the earlier points, that's why if I was the manager, I can just completely change. This isn't working. Completely change things. Let's just go with a different system. Let's put teams in the back foot. Let's show that we are Glasgow Celtic. We've got the best players in the country. We've got the biggest support in the country. You come to our place, we will hammer you. And then, sorry, I'm a bit
no,
excited there.
No, but the thing that you're pointing out here, I think a lot of fans are on the same page as you. When I'm sitting watching that last night, and Brendan Rodgers does change it at half time. I mean, we were obviously doing a halftime bulletin, Chris and myself, and we're wondering why Donovan's getting taken off, because he was by far, he was absolutely not the worst player in the pitch, but it was because of the formation change, and it opened it up. It did open the game up. Yes, we ended up losing 2-0, but we'll get to the goal that was scored that might have changed the game. All these shoulda, woulda, coulda moments. But I do think we opened up. Yes, it leaves the back line exposed. The point I made last night, though, Jim, was that it's not the kind of thing we should be trying and trialing in a European game. I look at this season's fixtures at home domestically, where we play St Mirren first game of the season, we play Livingston, we play Hibs, and we've also played Falkirk. The Hibs game is a prime example where you have got, the guts of 80% possession, Jim. The Hibs are not getting the ball. They're not creating chances. You're creating all the chances. Why are we playing with 4 at the back? And I think that is the prime example of try it then. Try it against Livingston. Try it against Falkirk, and really open teams up and get the rhythm of your side up and running. I was watching Brendan Rodgers standing on the sidelines yesterday, and behind him you could see Johnny Kenny and you could see Dane Murray in the dugout. And I'm thinking to myself, right, going back to this big word, this buzzword, dysfunction. Why have we signed Shin Yamada? And why have we signed Simpson Pusey? Because you're going back to the investment aspect of it. Yes, they're not going to cost 10 million like Balakwisha will by the end of his contract if he's still here. And we've seen how difficult it is to get rid of these guys if they're not playing, Jim. A la Marco Tilio and Lewis Palma and all these different players. It's hard to get them off your books if they're not playing. Lagerbielke will come back to him. His performance was described as colossal. He's a guy that didn't get. Smith used to say that he was treated dreadfully by the club. We're doing it again, Jim. We're repeating the same mistakes with different players. Simpson Pusey comes up from Manchester City. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Right, that's my caveat. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But why has he not kicked a ball for Celtic? I mean, you mentioned it. It's not with hindsight. You mentioned it at the time. Lagerbielke, you didn't understand why he's not been given a chance. You said he's been treated dreadfully, and we're still doing it with another wave of new players. Inamura's another one. Why do we continue to do that? Is that part of the dysfunction of this recruitment thing not working because people are buying players and the manager doesn't want them?
Well, I mean, we don't see them in training every day, and I think that was an excuse that was put forward. But Lagerbielke is an international player. Dorosky was an international player. And I'll kind of talk about the days I used to take kids football and I took a representative team. And if you were undecided about a couple of kids and somebody says he plays for Rangers Boys Club, he doesn't play for anyone, we'll think, well, if he plays for Rangers Boys Club, he must be half decent, or Celtic Boys Club, whatever. And to me, you think, well, if he plays for an international team, he must be pretty good, because actually he's the best 11 in his whole country. So without thinking too much about it, that means he must be quite good. And I thought Lagerbielke never let Celtic down. It's a bit Europa at Ibrox, but he kind of gathered himself, and that was a huge game. Him and William Scalesman, that was the game Kyogo scored the only goal of the game, and they had a VAR goal disallowed, and that shaped the whole season. So we actually owe a lot to Lagerbielke, and I thought he was fine. But yet we got rid of him. We've got another players who I don't think Austin Trusty is as good as Lagerbielke, but that's a personal opinion. But to get back to the dysfunctional thing, I think if a club like Celtic, with the resources that we have, normally never mind the ridiculous situation we have £80 million in the bank, if we sign a player on loan with no option to buy, somebody should be sacked, I think. Because what's the point in doing that? When we have all this money, we shouldn't be going loans with no option to buy. If you're going to loan with an option to buy, try before you buy type of thing, and that's your strategy, again using that word, then fair dues. If you're not sure, that's fine. But you've touched on the fact that Engels and Ida and Trust, we could have got them for half the price if we knew what we were doing.
Yep.
And that's cost us a lot of money, and that's a bit, and I'm not having to go to the lad, but see, when you sit back and you say, we've invested the guts of £10 million in a guy called Balakwisha and he can't get a game, you have to ask serious questions about strategy, about who's buying the players, who's picking the team, what are the tactics. And I just felt, and I know I'm harping on a bit with the lad, I just thought, I was keen for him to play last Saturday, like the games, I thought Hibs last week was the perfect game to give him a game in his natural position, home game, 60,000, whatever, put Tonetsky, another wing, and give him a game and see. But see him coming on for the last 15, 20 minutes. If I'm a player, it takes you a while to get into the game. If you're an attacking player who might take on players, it's about confidence. So I'm going to give the guy a bit of slack. I think he's been played out of position. I think he's been played in games maybe it was too big. Maybe first game it was too big. He's played in rubbishy parks. Daddy. Give the guy a game in his own position and let's see what he's like. Some people say that's he's not a winger. So who knows? But if you're a football manager, that's your job. You should know your squad. You're spending every waking moment thinking about how can I make this team better. You're on the training ground because obviously the manager that we have is like a training ground manager. He's on it. He must see all these kind of guys. He must think, well, look at all these cards I've got. I could play this card or that card, play it in a different formation, do. Because what we're watching just now, as you said earlier, it's a bit ominous at this point in time. And I think when the friends across the city get their act together, that'll be a challenge. I think we're a dead exciting league race. So if you're a bit of a kind of sadist to say, actual fact, this will be quite exciting this year because we've brought ourselves down several levels, I think, and we have manufactured our own stress. Such a brilliant phrase that the manager used, and I think that's something that could be played back again and again and again. And when I got that, unique opportunity to ask him a question, that's what I said to him, that you said, we're managing our own stress again. And that was his criticism of the board, without saying, you're a bunch of diddies. You have manufactured our own stress. And this is what's happening just now. Last night was just an example of that. That's not to absolve the manager or to absolve the players, but the whole dysfunctionality of the whole thing has led to last night, kind of led to last Saturday a wee bit, led to last-minute penalties, led to late goals against St Mirren, led to getting their backsides felt in Kazakhstan, and whatever. So that's all linked, basically. But, however, we are where we are just now. We can't change those cards until we get to January. And who's to say we'll even change those cards in January? It's up to the manager now to buckle down. And if certain players aren't working, if Kasper Schmeichel isn't playing, he should be playing, he's out. If Carl McGregor's, he's out. Whoever they think. As I said earlier, I thought Kieran Tierney appears to be a shadow of himself. And Sarachi actually looked pretty good when he came on.
He has looked good.
So I think he's got lots of cards to play. He needs to play the right cards and the right formation.
When we're talking about players coming in and making an impact, Tonetsky, absolutely. He's made a tremendous impact. I'm going to bring up a point, actually, that's made by Ridiculizer, who comes in and says Tonetsky is a leader. He's making. I know what he means. I know what he means by this, because not only is he making things happen, and he's shown that intent, Jim, he's absolutely demanding. And a lot of the time it's Iheanacho, a player who's played at the top level of English football, and he's demanding that he makes moves and makes runs, etc. And I like that in a player just in the door, chastising strikers for not getting on the end of things, etc. already.
But just on that point, I don't know if it came across on the TV, but when they played one of the crosses to Tonetsky from the left, and Iheanacho wasn't there, he went ballistic at him. So that's a very fair point. So
he fizzed it right across. Yeah, he's a leader. And you look behind him and you say, well, Sarachi out of nowhere, it's a loan deal. He's a guy who's not played a lot of football. Where was Sarachi on our list of left backs? I'm going to suggest, without any specialist knowledge, he wasn't in the top 5, right? He's a guy that's come in with no option to buy. He wasn't playing for Boca Juniors. We've pulled him. And when you watch him, you think, right, if you didn't know who Kieran Tierney was and you were comparing them like for like, Jim, Sarachi's ahead of Kieran Tierney right now.
I don't think he's on a list. I think he's somebody who just appeared out of thin air.
Probably an agent-led move, I would suggest.
Similar to Iheanacho, I think these guys have just appeared. And again, just shows the whole dysfunction. Okay, we might have won a watch and he's quite good, but how he's ended up in the team, that's not a strategy. That's just opportunistic. And we can't keep, we'll just cover the same point again, I suppose. But yeah, in terms of people that stood up, Tonetsky stood up, Sarachi stood up.
I think Iheanacho as well. I think Iheanacho,
he looked good. Yeah, I liked him. I think he holds the ball up well. He takes the ball in well, and he can play a pass. And he just has to improve his sharpness. I think that's what needs to be improved.
So if we look at it, Jim, and I'm going to go back to, before we get to the disallowed goal, right? I'm going to go back to a point you made where what you want to do is come out with 2 players net from every transfer window. And I don't think that's beyond you. So you lose Kuhn and you're like, right, we need to replace him. But in order to strengthen, we need to buy someone else in as well. That's fine. And I look at the new signings and I think, right, if we were to look at the performances of Sarachi, Tuneke, Iheanacho, and even Nigrin, who I know wasn't great last night, but across the piece, I think Nigrin has got a pass as a signing. There's 4 signings that have come in and done pretty well. So what's all the other guys doing? And that's where you look at it and you say, well, actually, Kasper Schmeichel's not playing very well. Neither is Callum McGregor or Rio Atati or Dyson. So you're bringing the 4 new guys in who are stepping up, Jim, and the guys that you should be able to rely on and hang your coat on every single week, their performances have gone down the way. And in terms of managing that, how do you manage that then as Brendan Rodgers?
Well, I think Alistair Johnson been missing is another thing. I know the young lad Donovan has done really well, but that's such a massive drop off. No disrespect to the lad compared to a seasoned international Alistair, who's a leader. So we're losing him. He's possibly the biggest leader at the club, maybe at the moment. He's quite a vocal guy. I mean, Callum has got a different way of leading. Maybe whereas Johnson's a bit in your face, a wee bit demanding. So maybe we're missing him more than we thought. But yeah, I mean, if you're not playing well, there's such a huge squad. Get them in there. It has to do that. Yeah. I thought Bernardo was okay last night. The other thing about that, again, this idea about if you know nothing about football, the fact that you've got somebody who was the Portuguese under-21 captain last year, whenever it was, the Portugal are like one of the top nations in the world, and he's their under-21 captain. He must be pretty good. Yeah. And if I'm Bernardo and I'm sitting on the bench and getting the last 10 minutes of games, I'm furious, absolutely, because I know I've got so much to offer. And play me in my right position, and I'll do a job for you. Play me for the last 10 minutes. What am I going to do for the last 10 minutes? I've trained all week for this, and I'm getting 10 minutes. And I'm the former under 21. Because if I'm Paulo Bernardo, I want to be in the Portuguese team. I want to go into the World Cup because I'm good enough. You need to play me. You need to show what I can do. And it's only in the last couple of games he's did a sniff. I would play him. Maybe drop McGregor, maybe for a game. See how it goes.
Well, Bernardo, for me, when he came in, it was interesting. I felt that prior to the game, the Portuguese representatives the journalists were asking questions about Bernardo. And then he played. But I'm not suggesting for a moment that's why he played. I had my starting 11 and I had Engels in there. But Bernardo, for me, had a decent game. I thought he ran out of steam, Jim, because for the very reason you've already mentioned, he's not been getting the game time. And he gets thrown in the European game. And I think he did well. But he was not the issue for me. The issue I've got at the moment are the experienced campaigners who, some of them have got 5 European campaigns under their belts now for Celtic. Guys like McGregor's got even more than that. He's one of the most decorated Celts in the history of the football club. He's played more European games than just about anybody else. I want to see him stepping up. I want to see Schmeichel. I want to see Kieran Tierney because he knows the magnitude of what we expect as a football club. And we're not seeing it. We're not seeing it from Rio. We're not seeing it from Maeda. Yet we are seeing it from the 4 guys. And I know there's people will probably disagree with me on Nigrin here. But in terms of looking at 4 new players that have come in, how well they've adapted, I think the 4 that we've mentioned have done pretty well. And I want to talk about Iheanacho because the big talking point last night, and it's the coulda, woulda, shoulda moment, Jim, is the goal. Now, I thought his work rate was phenomenal. I mentioned last night, he does that thing that I love my centre forwards to do where they drop deep. Dembele was brilliant at it. Ida couldn't get his head round it, where you drop deep, you pick the ball up in the centre circle, basically, and you are part of building it up, or you hold the ball up, Samaras style or Yakamaka style. He was good at that. He's very good at that, and then he gets back in. Didn't quite get back in for the one you mentioned from Tuneke. But the way that he collected the ball and finished was tremendous. It was outstanding. And I'm watching it thinking, we're back in this. And then, horrendously, it's chopped off. Now, I've been reading this morning, the eagle-eyed amongst you out there have pointed out, it was actually chopped off by the linesman, right, on the park. It was an on-field decision, and VAR didn't have enough evidence, apparently, to say that it was an incorrect on-field decision. I've watched it, Matt, from every single angle. I've watched it frame by frame, Jim. Iheanacho did not handball that ball. Simple as that. Hit the top of his head, his forehead. He was able to control it and put it away. I thought it was a shocking decision, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, VAR was meant to be brought in to stop that kind of stuff. And I get the point about evidence to overturn on-field decisions. That's the rules in terms of, but they must have seen that from all the angles everyone else has seen it from. So we needed a wee bit of luck last night. And I think if we'd have scored the goal, I think we'd made a good start to the second half. We changed the formation. And I think chances are we might win the game. And we're having a different conversation today. So these things are fine margins. You know, we've maybe benefited in the past from a VAR decision that maybe we didn't think we were going to get. So I think, you know, that's football for you. You had a wee bit of luck, and we didn't get it last night. As I said, I don't think there's much in it between both teams. I think a horrendous goalkeeping mistake and a bit of bad defending at the end, and a VAR decision that should have went our way. So no, it was a good performance. I just thought it's what it is. I don't think it achieves anything to dwell. VAR made a mistake, and I think Celtic need an answer from how they didn't overturn that. Shows just tell us what you've seen. Tell us what you've seen that we didn't see.
Yeah.
And then if he shows that, then we'll say fair enough. You know, so I think this is a kind of black and white issue. You know, we've asked a question, shows what it is. And that's what I like about what we've done with the Willie Collum panel type thing. You know, that you put your hands up and say, you know, I mean, I would expect you to go up and say, we were wrong. Because we can't actually show you that. It's a bit like, what was the game? Was it Hibs? Where the Alistair Johnson one was
that's right,
over the line or not over the line. And and they couldn't prove it otherwise. And you thought, we've made a mistake there. And they said, yeah, we did make a mistake. Fair enough. Somebody made a mistake last night. It's cost us a potential draw, a potential victory. It cost some money in the greater scheme of things. But hey-ho, that's football. You can have nothing you do about it. Move on.
Well, the big thing for me is I didn't want to lead with that, because then it would have been sour grapes. It would have been like, you know, trying to blame everything on that decision, which I'm not going to do, because our performance wasn't good enough, Jim. But as you know, in football, momentum is huge, energy is huge. You get that goal, and that could sway things. But we'll never know. Johnny Ryan, I'm going to bring in some of the comments now on the YouTube. Johnny says, blame the board for the transfer debacle, but blame Rodgers and the players for the results. I think I've said this from the beginning, and I said it after the Kairat game in particular, Johnny. It is collective. I'm not blaming the board for everything. The board have got answers. They've got questions to answer, rather. Absolutely. And I'm hoping that the beginning of that process starts on Monday. I really am hoping that happens. But we also have to focus on who's not performing. And I've named 4 guys there that I want a performance from every week, because I've campaigned experienced players, and we're not seeing the level of performance that we should, to the point that Ridiculizer made earlier. Tunecki's showing them up. He's grabbing the initiative himself. He's showing intent. He had a great shot, and it was a brilliant save himself, actually, near the end of the game. He's trying to rouse the fans. You see him doing all that kind of stuff. I think Nygren has done pretty well. A wee bit inconsistent since he came in. Iheanacho, I have tipped to score 20 goals for the first time in his senior career. And Sarachi, a guy who came out of nowhere, really. I know he's a Uruguayan internationalist, etc., but he wasn't playing with Boca Juniors. And he's coming in, he's played really, really well. So I think in terms of that, you've got 4 new signings coming in. If all the guys play to their full potential that we know they're capable of, then the team is going to perform a lot better. And for some reason, they are not. Maybe Jim's right. Maybe we need to make some changes to people who think they're undroppable. TV Kirkcorran. Sorry, Jim. In you come.
No, this is top level elite football that we've got here. These guys are getting 20, 30 grand, 40 grand a week. It's not some sort of retirement home. If they're not doing their job, they move aside and let somebody else in. And if that other person doesn't do their job, they get moved aside, etc., etc. And the manager, again, will stand and fall by results. So if we win the league at the end of the season, even if it's been a slog, the manager gets all the credit because he won the league. And that's what happened in his first season back. We were turgid, as I said, for 8 months, but he got us over the line and we won the league and we won the cup and everything was great. But underlying that, we knew that wasn't good enough. And the phrase I keep saying about on-field performances masking on-field success, masking off-field performances, that's what happened that season. We just, managed to do it at the death. But that masked 8 months of pretty turgid football. So at this point in time, if a player's not doing it, then they go on the bench or they go out the squad, whatever. That's
Totally.
the reality of the thing. And the players understand that themselves. Whether you're Callum McGregor or the young lad Donovan, it doesn't matter. And if he was to leave the young lad Donovan out for the next game, it's not because he played badly or whatever. He just maybe feels tactically, maybe Wilson's a bit faster, Johnson's fit or whatever. But Schmeichel's performance last night wasn't good enough, Casper. You're on the bench on Sunday. It's not difficult.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I agree with you, Jim. And I think that there is sometimes an insistence on waiting until a player hits the form. I think we're in a situation, it reminds me very much, because there's a few comments coming through saying that this is like the COVID season. I disagree. I think it's far more like Brendan Rodgers' first season back, where we've had an underwhelming transfer window in the summer. And like you say, the football seems to be pretty turgid. How did we turn it around that season? I think January was massive, even though we only brought in one player who really started firing. But he started playing his form players that he could trust. One of them was James Forrest, of course, Jim.
James Forrest, yeah. James Forrest made all the difference. Particularly at Dundee, I think he scored both goals in a 2-1 victory, was it? And that was huge because every point was pretty much valued at that point in time, because across the city they were thinking it was their season, and we managed to pull out the bag. And that, I remember saying on the podcast at that time, if we lose the league this season and we've got 70 million in the bank, this will be one of the most embarrassing campaigns ever. And the same goes for this season, given the fact we still have that level of funds sitting in the bank and we didn't use it. But yeah, as a collective, they're all responsible. And I think I said last time that the Kairat game for me was, say, 50% the board, 25% the manager, 25% the players, if you were to apportion some sort of percentage blame, whatever, because we should have had better players. As I said, I firmly believe, and people maybe mock this, if we had the front four who play at Ibrox against Kairat, we'd have scored goals.
I think the bottom line is, if we had had Tunetsky, Iheanacho, I know he wasn't the centre forward we were chasing, Jim, and if we'd just kept Kuhn for 2 games, keep him for 210 minutes. I mean, I said this last night, the money's not going anywhere. Como wanted to pay 17 million. Yes, we will agree to do this deal. However, we've got a couple of pretty important games coming up that's going to potentially make us 40 million. Therefore, we're going to keep this guy to play these 2 games. I mean,
I'll put devil's advocate. I'll put devil's advocate. If Kuhn's been told that there's a big offer on the table, how motivated is he? And this goes back to, you wanted Kuhn 2.0 in the building. Just let him go, and you've got Kuhn 2.0. You've got somebody who we think is as good as that player, and that's all part of the management exercise to try and balance all these kind of things up.
It is. I mean, I would use Kyogo as an example, Jim. We didn't know at the time against Young Boys that he was going to do a deal that night, but it was obviously lined up. He knew he was leaving that day. He went out and he played his final game for Celtic. He scored a hat-trick in the first half. Every one of them was chopped off, but it did not affect his performance because he knew he was leaving, you know? So, yeah, it's one of these situations. I think you're right. There is a collective responsibility. Now, I'm going to bring TV Kirkoran back in desperate need of a clear out from top to bottom. Far too many freeloaders, a disgrace to the jersey. What I would say is that since Brendan Rodgers come back, it's pretty clear that the current setup as it stands at the moment, and whether or not that changes, we don't know. We're hoping it does. We're hoping for change. That's the whole purpose of Monday's meeting, right? But the way the club runs and the way that Brendan Rodgers operates don't match, Jim. They don't match, right? It's like the mix does not match. Now, when Ange Postecoglou came in, because we had lost the league, we'd lost the 10, all that kind of thing, I think, and the fact that Peter Lawwell wasn't there and Don Mackay was, I think there was more of an acceptance to allow more of the influence from the manager, and he was certainly buying players that he wanted. I mean, no one at Celtic knew anything about the Japanese league, but Ange Postecoglou did, and he was able to tap in and buy those players. The transfer record in those 2 windows, those 2 initial windows, was incredible. It wasn't flawless, Jim, but it was incredible. And so it worked for Ange in the first season. Did it work for him in the second season? Well, we bring in Moy, we bring in Johnson. There was some successes. But right now, the way the club operates and the way Brendan operates doesn't work. I'm sorry, it doesn't work. So there has to be changes afoot. What those changes are going to be, Brendan's already said he will not leave the building until his contract is up. He's not been offered a new contract. There is an uprising currently happening between the Celtic Fans Collective, and I'm going to get Jim's thoughts on that in the last 5 minutes of the show. Ian Boy, totally agree, Sonny. We're in a mess and need a root and branch clear out and reset. Well, Ian, I've spoken till the cows come home about what I think should happen at Celtic. And yes, there has to be change in the boardroom. We need fresh ideas. We need new faces. We need a reset. We need new energy in the boardroom. We need to have a structural change when it comes to the football department, which includes recruitment. Jim and I started off by speaking about this, where everybody in the football department knows exactly what everybody else is doing, so that you're not being presented with players that you're never going to play. That doesn't make sense to me. We need to sort out the academy. We've got a facility there at Barrafield. We need to sort out the staff within that academy because we're not producing enough players. And we need to sort out the stadium. Absolutely, we need to sort out the stadium. It's not good enough. And it's only going to get worse until we start investing in it. And the communication and the relationship between the club and the supporters has to improve. That takes me to last night, Jim. I was watching with interest. Obviously, now there seems to be a board cam, which is trained on the Celtic board every time something goes wrong in the park. And every time it goes over to them, they're sharing WhatsApp messages and having a wee giggle. This is the kind of level of attention that they're going to be getting now until things change. There is a meeting on Monday. I call you the OG because you were old school 1990s Save Ourselves. And by the way, you never take the credit, but you deserve an immense amount of credit, you and the guys, for setting up that movement. I think you paved the way for fans to mobilise back then and challenge the board. And that's exactly what happened with Celts for Change. Monday, what do you think has to happen on Monday? There is a meeting arranged. We have spoken about it, Jim. What is the outcome for you that you think would be a positive for the collective?
I think where to start with this stuff. I think you have to temper expectations. I'm not on this. Well, in fact, what was interesting to me was the fact that the Celtic collective weren't actually asked to go to this meeting. They contacted 8, and I had this written down somewhere. They'd contacted 8 different supporters, 8 separate organisations, to say, do you want to come in for a chat? Now, what's happened, and I'm trying to remember the timeline of this, but I've got the utmost admiration for anyone who puts their head above the parapet and does something. Because as I said before, it's dead easy. I can sit here and just spout off rubbish, and people can, go on social media and X and Facebook and say, we demand this and we demand that.
And you should do this and you should do that. Absolutely.
You should do that. And to put your head above the parapet, even if I disagree with what people are saying, I admire that hugely. Because particularly in this day and age of social media, and you know that better than anyone. That sounds like Bertie Old. You know that better than me, son. That basically you go on Sky and you get slaughtered. What's this guy know? He doesn't speak for me, Katie Lang, all that stuff. So, so basically, I admire that. So what's been happening is that virtually every single Celtic fan has just been shouting and bawling. Apart from, I think it was the North Curve for the GB said, you know what? I'm going to do something here. I'm going to write a letter to the board saying I've got 7 points. I want an answer to. They did that. They got off their backsides and they did that. And then people signed up to that. So you're quite right. So all these other organisations put their names to it, including Acsom. They did that. And the next thing they did is they put a kind of questionnaire out and they got something like 40,000 replies in a few days. And they had the results of that in a few days. People who put their head above the parapet and did something, got their hands dirty. They organised a meeting, and that's the one that you and I were at, that meeting where tensions were high, emotions were high. These are the guys who go to the games. These are the guys that, 12 o'clock on a Sunday at Dingwall. These are the guys who go to these games. You're not going to tell them to boycott games. They said, let's form a steering group. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's not go into Kilmarnock for the first 10 minutes. Vote on that. Democratic. Let's do this. People don't agree, but it's a democratic process. These are guys who have done all these things, and they've got representation from these other bodies on this Celtic Fans Collective. But they weren't asked. These other organisations were, and some of them haven't been involved in this Celtic Fans Collective. So to me, I don't understand this. And I think there's been talk about they've got a PR company in to advise their PR department. Well, kind of, does that mean that the guys really are not fit for purpose if they can't figure out what's happening next? And my guess is that the PR companies say, get these guys in for a chat, try and take some of the heat out of the situation. Right. But why didn't they go to the Celtic fans collective who've actually put their heads above the parapet and said, we would like some things to happen. We're going to take some action. We're going to do blah, blah, blah. So, intentional or not. And I know the Celtic fans collective have went back because you're on the group and because you work 25 hours a day, I've kind of substituted. So I've seen what's been happening. Obviously, I can't talk about anything that's happened, but I've kind of seen what's happening after what happened in Wednesday, where the announcement comes out, and they convened a steering group meeting within a couple of hours or so to say, well, how are we going to respond to this? And we've got the silent protest and the democratic exercise, and we'll get a letter out, and then we'll get that to the fan media guys like yourself, and then they'll put that out, and I've got the letter sitting here, and it's all about, thanking the fans, and the meeting's coming up, and that's great, and whatever. But so all that kind of stuff happened, but it was actually leaked. The actual invitation was leaked before they had that meeting.
Yeah.
And then there was some organisations who already said, yeah, we're coming. We'll be there. And you bring 2 representatives. And again, this is just my opinion, only my opinion, basically. So they've asked 8 organisations to come along and bring 2 people. There's 16 people coming along to this meeting on Monday night. And I know the collective maybe want to add another 1 or 2 to that who, I think they're quite entitled to do that. And I don't know where that's at this point in time. So maybe 18, maybe 20 people. And the board have said something like that they will have Michael Nicholson and they will have Chris Mackay. With other representatives from the club. Right. So say they bring along 2 or 3 pals. Right. You're going to have 20 odd people in that room. Again, this is just my opinion in this. I'd have thought the sensible way forward would have said, see, you guys have put your head above the parapet and see who you represent. All these other teams, do you want to send along a few guys, 2, 3, 4, something like that, and we'll have a proper chat about this. There's going to be over 20 people in the room, 8 different organisations who are separate organisations who don't talk to each other. Understandably, don't talk because they're separate organisations. I don't know what their objectives are going to be. And I see things in social media like, you make sure you don't leave that room until Nicholson's been fired. Don't you think, what are you on about? You have to temper your expectations for this. Any negotiation starts off with, we want everything, and they say you'll get nothing, and then you compromise and you end up somewhere between those 2 extremes, whatever. So and then when I saw, keep holding their feet to the fire, and you're thinking, whose feet, what fire, what are you on about? Is this working? So I think, I don't know how that meeting's going to pan out. I don't know what the structure is going to be. I don't know what the objectives are going to be. For all I know, all this stuff is taking place just now. All the guys are talking to each other and making sure it's a coordinated meeting and we're all joined up. Because if you've got 8 different organisations, maybe they've got 8 different objectives. And I know, if I just grab it again and look down the list, so maybe the Celtic disabled supporters, maybe they've got some specific issues that they want to raise with regard to access for disabled people. Maybe that's why they're coming in Monday night. I don't know. You've got the Irish supporters group, you've got the Ultra guys, maybe they've all got different things, whereas I don't know how that's going to turn out. And if it was me, I just think what you want to do is maybe have, you can mention it there, regular communication.
Yeah.
And whatever form that takes. So from now on in, somebody from the Celtic Football Club meets with some sort of fan representative once a month, like whatever it's going to be, and it's under some sort of fans forum or something like that. Maybe look at specific areas that we've got concerns about. You've mentioned them: recruitment, youth development, transfer strategy. I just made that one up on the hoof there, something like that. I think one thing that has to be done, has been flagged up before, is the fact that whoever leaked that story to the Sun, they're removed from the organisation. I don't think that's a good look to have that person there. And what was the other thing I was thinking? And then you publish the minutes for that, and you keep transparent.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But Michael Nicholson is not going to be like, led out on a skewer after the meeting come Monday night. So you have to be realistic. And that's why when I see all the stuff on the socials about, somebody was saying you should video the meeting so we can all see what's happening. What people don't understand is that within that steering group, there's people who don't want their names to be known. for very good reasons. They've
Yeah.
put their head above the parapet. And if their names are out there, before you know it, somebody's having a go at them on X. Somebody's having a go on them in Facebook.
Or they're maybe getting heat from their employers.
Or they
it
get heat
could be
from
something
their
like that. Yeah.
employees. I mean, I know you touched on the GBT story the other day, horrendous thing. There's a picture of some guy, so that's the guy. Now, is it the guy? I don't know if it's the guy. If it's the guy, he deserves all he gets. But see, that wasn't the guy. So social media is a kind of dangerous place. I'm on here, people know what my name is and what I look like, and if they want to slaughter me, fine. Because I put my head above the parapet to go on a podcast, and you think that's pretty small beer. But some of the abuse you get is quite bizarre. You know that better than me. Again, not better than me, son. And the abuse that you get for just saying, we're not very happy about things. What do you know? What do you know, a clown? He's not talking for me. And that was the way it was always going to be. Is that how do you get all these varied organisations together and agree on the same thing? Now, one of the things that's not happening, I don't think I'm betraying any kind of confidence, is that at the moment there's no spokesperson for the Celtic Fans Collective. And there's a school of thought that said, you know what, whoever the spokesperson is going to be, they'll be associated with wherever they come from.
Yeah.
So for talking's sake, if it was somebody from the GB was the spokesperson, people would say, that's a GB movement. And it's not a GB movement, it's somebody who's going to speak on their behalf. And they thought at this point in time, we don't have a specific spokesperson. So that then means that when you talk about the Celtic Fans Collective, you're a bit hazy on who that is. Sales for Change was Matt McGlone was the guy that stood up and said, this was happening. He wasn't making all the decisions. He was the person who said, Matt, you're the guy to talk to the people. But we did say for ourselves, Wally Wilson did that. I'm in the background organising meetings and doing newsletters and whatever it is, and nobody knows who the hell I am. Unless you glance me in one of these videos, Wally Wilson is the voice. He's the guy. Matt was the voice.
Yeah.
There's no voice yet for the Celtic Fans Club. That might come. I don't know. Again, it's a democratic group, and maybe that might come next. But I just think, what was the question you asked was, what's my expectations for Monday? I think you should temper your expectations. I don't think you should set unrealistic ideas of what's going to be achieved in Monday. And I think if you just sit back and you think there's going to be about 20 odd different people in that room, who's going to talk? Who's going to ask the questions? What questions are you going to ask? Who's going to answer them? Who's going to this? When you start to drill down into this stuff, you see how complex I think the thing is. It's not like two people are talking to each other and they're saying, we demand this, and they say, you're not getting that. Talk, and we come from the middle. There's upwards of 20 people, over 20 people will be there. So I'm not exactly sure what that's going to achieve. Again, I must stress this is just my opinion. And my opinion would have been, there's a group of people who put their head above the parapet when no one else has, who deserve all the credit in the world, whether you agree with them or not, silent protest and all that kind of stuff. And because they've done that, I would have thought those are the people that the club would have went to and said, we see you've mobilised, we've seen you've organised, we've seen you've done all this kind of stuff. Do you want to send along 2, 3, 4 of these guys, whatever? But even if you did that, who are the 3 or 4 that you send along? And you want to make sure that the 3 or 4 are representative of the ultras or whatever. All these things are pretty complex and they're not simple. They are by no means simple. And that's why I get a bit kind of laughing when I'm saying, hold our feet to the fire.
This is the thing, there's a lot of noise, Jim. And the points you make are the points that are being discussed currently in relation to how do we approach this? How is it a unified objective rather than 8 different associations or groups looking for different things? It will be structured. And I take your point. I think it's important to highlight it. The amount of time and effort that these people are putting into, those that are on the steering group. And, I see this online all the time. Oh, didn't I do the silent protest? Do this protest. And you think, well, that would cost tens of thousands of pounds to do that visual protest at so many games, etc. So the way that they've managed to mobilise very quickly and be organised so well deserves a huge amount of credit. And to get what I see as a first result of a meeting on Monday is brilliant. But that is all it is at this moment. It's one step towards hopefully having far more communication with the football club to push for the positive change. But the word compromise, I think, is the most important word and also the most important person in the room or the person with the most important role will be the chair, because they have to make sure that it's organised. Now, you might have had experienced people in the group of being in a courtroom or a boardroom, and or meetings, high-level meetings at the organisation you work for, it has to be managed and it needs to be chaired. And I'm pretty sure that it will be. But in terms of expectations, it's all about finding the sweet spot. It's all about ensuring that, the club can't be let off the hook, Jim. But every single want and desire that you want to get from this individual meeting may not be achievable at this time. So it's one step. And I think it's a positive one. Last night, you're looking at the outcome of the game. There's boos at the end of the match. The board where they were sitting they were getting it in the neck. I mean, it wasn't quite as bad as the New Year's Day game back in the 90s, Jim, where we were throwing Mars bars at the boards. We didn't throw.
There's an idea. There's an idea.
Take your Mars bars, king size. We never threw coins because we would have kept them back in the day, but we were throwing Mars bars at them. And it got a wee bit nasty. And there's a word, unity, that we used a few times when we were talking to Willie Hockey last week. Try and find this kind of unity. There's people at the football club, be that on the park, in the dugout, and in the boardroom, who are not fit for purpose, who are not good enough for the roles that they have at Celtic. And that's what I'm talking about when I say collectively. There's players that shouldn't be at Celtic. There's people who I think have overstayed the welcome, be that in the academy or on the training pitch. And there's people in the boardroom. And all of these things have to change for us to be the best we can possibly be.
I think you said expectations. I think that's the key word for Monday night. That do not expect, as I said, Michael Nicholson been led out the door.
Live stream it, and it's been live streamed. That's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. And I think what you also have to do, you have to do in life, is adapt as you go along. Because, as I said, what those guys, the North Curve, GB did was absolutely astonishing in a few days to have done that. And I was at the meeting as well, and I stood up and I said, I don't think these are the right objectives. Right? Because it's all about people's different opinion, because I'm thinking, I think that'll be hard to achieve. But so whether that's changed or not, who knows moving forward. But so you kind of, there's a phrase, kind of, you kind of try and concentrate on the battles you can win, as opposed to spending a lot of time on battles that you never win, ever. So you do adapt and try and maybe go in a different tact or whatever. And I've said before about the fact that we've covered quite a lot today, but we didn't talk about how we've got this bad corporate governance, and that seems to be like a factual thing, as opposed to an opinion. I could say to you that I don't think Michael Nicholas is doing a particularly good job. You can counter saying, no, in actual fact, he's done blah, 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 blah. Fair enough. But if you say, no, it's actually bad corporate governance to have two people on the board for 20 years, you can't argue with me that, because that's a fact. And I think people will respond better when you're giving them factual information to say, you know what, you're right. Actually, that's very good. And I think that's an objective that could possibly be achieved.
You're spot on. And I also think, going back to the brilliant wee video we shared from Steve-O at Celtic World Order, you can show them evidence of a stadium that needs work, and then you say, listen, you've just told us you've got 80 million quid in the bank. Why are you not? What are your plans for the stadium?
Absolutely, because I mean, and I've said it a number of times, I can't see the big screen from where I sit. Now that to me means that nobody in the last, since COVID then, 2021, nobody in the club has got any idea who can see the big screen and who can't. Nobody's taking the trouble just to kind of wander around the stadium for a couple of hours and sit in different seats and think, you know what, they can't see the big screen here. Maybe we should be kind of monitors here. I saw the video that you said where they've dumped the banners in a kind of big, almost looks like a skip kind of stuff. How can you defend that? How can you possibly defend that? And when you look at, you can't measure Celtic Football Club against Tottenham Hotspur or against Manchester United, but you can against Ajaxes of this world. And we one of the guys on Acsom group chat, I forget who it is, who went to Ajax and went to the stadium and came back and said, I've got this, and this, and it's just space age compared to us. We can compare ourselves to them, and that's who we should be comparing ourselves to. Not anywhere else in Scotland, because we have 70 million in the bank. The Ajaxes of this world, if they can do all this kind of stuff, we should be able to. Who's actually doing that? Who's actually benchmarking against all these teams out there who are, quote unquote, maybe world class in what they do? Because that phrase is trotted out. And then, I suppose we could go on all day about this. They talked about the world-class, we want a new chief executive, and it'll be a world-class one. Just happened to be the guy in the office next door.
Yeah, who's never been a CEO in his life. See, the thing there that you're mentioning about Ajax, it was our good friend, Peter McGackie, brilliant musician. Go and check him out. But the point I made, and I don't think you limit the visits to this, but you see, when we play a team abroad, our SLO visits the stadium, right? And there's a whole purpose of that. It's part of the process. Our SLO visits the stadium so that we know the information that we can share with our fans who are travelling to that stadium, Jim. The do's, the don'ts, the entrances, the exits, things to look out for, the whole shebang. And the SLO does a phenomenal job, right? But if we're already making the visit, take somebody else with you, right? And do the stadium tour and do the whole thing. Because JP's looking around the stadium, he's going into the away end where the Celtic fans are going to be. We're doing all that stuff. And if you imagine it last season, we did it 5 times to 5 different stadiums, right? If you look at the European games that we had. And we're doing that every season. We should have a dossier of about 50 or 60 or 100 different stadiums and all the great stuff that they do that we can implement at Celtic Park, yet we don't. But nobody's ever thought about that. You know, oh, we're visiting all these European stadiums. What can we benefit from, as well as the information we need to give to the fans? I'll tell you what, Ajax do this really well, and Bratislava had this, and that would work at Parkhead. Nobody does that.
It's just a shocking indictment, and the bit about the fact there's no banners up. As I've said before, if you can't trust people with the small things, what chance have you got with the big things? When people talk about rebuilding the South Stand, they can't put banners up. That's the level of incompetence or dysfunctionality that's kicking about. Now, I put my hands up to say, see if there's something really clever that's beyond us and we can't do it, fair enough. We can't do that because we can't have a stadium like Spurs because that would cost 800 million. We can't do that. You know, we're not going to buy players at 40 million pounds. We're not going to. We get on that. The stuff that's doable, and that's why you're hiring all these people. And that's why they work there. To be the best they can be, to do the best for Celtic Football Club, to be world class, to be all these kind of things. And it's totally frustrating. And you talk to people in the South Stand where my original season ticket was that I lost because I was boycotting back in the day.
You were a rebel. Yes, you were.
I was a rebel back in the day. I didn't go for 3 years until the old board was away and all that kind of stuff. So I've not been to the South Stand in all that time. And they say that there's no hot water, there's no ladies' toilet, there's no whatever. And you're thinking, why? Why? And you can't put the excuse we have no money. You can't do that now. And if they came out next week and said, we've got a plan, we're not going to build the South Stand because we think it's too risky, whatever, but we're going to do this to it. A, B, C, D, E. We're going to, you mentioned something the other day about, never mind the banners around the ground, have these electronic screens going around the ground. You can advertise things, you can show highlights of old games, you can do anything you want. We're going to put these electronic screens. I know we did the disco lights. That's about the only thing I can think of. It's maybe a bit different. But we'll put these screens around the thing. We're going to develop the Celtic way. We're going to have pre-match fan zones. We're going to have this. We're going to have that. These are not difficult things to do. They are not difficult things to do.
No.
So I don't know why they haven't done these things. Either it's laziness or it's incompetence. Take your pick.
But both, I would say. Jim, it's always an absolute pleasure to speak to you. And we are currently running an irregular series. It's a 4-parter. Part 3 this evening is on the channel at 6 o'clock. It's an episode of This Is Acsom, and it was back in the days when Jim was a rebel, and he and others organised a number of rallies, the second of which was filmed. Terry Cassidy is grilled by the Celtic fans tonight. It's footage that has never been seen in its entirety, so watch it this evening. It's brilliant. It was great to watch it back. In actual fact, and when I was doing my voiceover, I tried my best not to sound like McIlvany this time. Thank you to Kev, CFC89, who agrees with Jim. We have a squad of players that we should be changing in terms of system and personnel. It's not working and need to build momentum. Every time we get a wee bit of momentum, we seem to lose it. And thank you also, Joseph McGonigal, for supporting the channel. It's always an absolute pleasure. We have a gig coming up in Greenock. The ticket link is underneath, should you wish to come and watch us alongside this man here. It's Chris Sutton. Greenock CSC, Halloween. Come along and get involved. Thank you, everybody, for getting involved today. And thank you to Jim Moore for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.